If you've been to a bookstore recently, you will tend to see a section for banned books. This section is so important because these books often cover diverse perspectives and challenging ideas. The reason we should care so much is because book banning restricts access to information, undermines our right to freedom of speech, and hinders the next generation's ability to think critically. Follow along as we cover why George Orwell's infamous 1984 is banned, what it means to be banned, and where.
Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about 1984 and why it's banned. So I think we should start with what it takes to get a book banned. And from my research, I found that normally to get a book banned, it takes being challenged first. And these challenges are normally brought up because people feel like they need to protect children from specific ideas and stuff like that.
So it's not just explicit material, but it can just be any idea?
So there's three main reasons that books normally get challenged. And those are that it can either be sexually explicit, they feel that it has offensive language, or just generally that they don't feel that it is good for any age group.
Any age group, so that's not just in schools.
Yeah, and it seems like it's mostly directed towards young children is their biggest concern. So I'm kind of throwing around some jargon of like challenging and banning. So I did want to clarify what the difference between those were. A challenge is just like I said, whenever somebody brings up attention that they don't want this book in normally like a public location, like a library or a school or something like that. And these occur on local municipalities. Think like a city rather than a state or nationally. And they normally have to go about challenging these, and they go through litigation to determine if it is just in being challenged and inevitably banned. A lot of these do not end up getting banned because of the First Amendment.
So a challenge is just more of a suggestion by a concerned citizen.
Exactly. And whenever it does get litigated and they determine that it isn't fit for all audiences, I guess you could say, that is whenever it is officially banned. And that's whenever they actually remove access from that piece of literature.
So are police officers breaking into people's homes and stealing their copies of 1984?
Not necessarily. Like I said, normally it's like a public school or a public library that these people are challenging to have removed from that local location.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Normally, it's like library patrons or somebody in like the school structure that's directly trying to remove it from, say, their school. Now that I've kind of covered what the differences between a challenge and a banning is, let's talk about why 1984 in particular is banned.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and like I could probably name a few reasons why a couple people would be upset by it, but banning it?
It's definitely kind of crazy that they're actively removing literature from people being able to consume it. But with 1984, the most noteworthy challenge occurred in Jackson County, Florida, where they challenged it for having pro-communist agenda and contained explicitly sexual content.
Pro-communist? Did they read the book?
I know, it felt really silly that like that's their rationale. And it happened in like the 70s, I believe. I don't have it listed here.
Oh, during the Red Scare.
Exactly. So it was during the Red Scare that they did it. So who knows exactly what their actual rationale was, but that's what they said, and it kind of just like clicked with the whole Red Scare stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's pretty wild that they accuse the book of being pro-communist whenever it's literally anti-totalitarian oligarchy.
I know, right? And that makes it feel like so half-hearted, right?
Well, it just feels like they didn't even read the book.
Yeah, they just have like this scare around it and just want to be against it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as for the sexual content, I also thought that was curious that obviously Julia and Winston have like stuff going on, but like I definitely wouldn't think it's too explicit for somebody to consume.
Yeah, especially if they're like of high school age or older.
But it's just funny that like you bring up the idea that the government ideas don't even translate, because he's literally like a self-proclaimed Democrat socialist. So like he's not even like pro-communism.
Yeah, like if he was arguing for a specific government, it wouldn't be communism at that point.
Exactly. It would be a pure democracy in its truest form. In his works, he's made it very, very clear that that's what he's targeting. What I also thought was funny was that 1984 is also banned in Cuba and was banned in the Soviet Union.
Oh, so the two most prominent communist countries were like, oh yeah, we hate this pro-communist book.
I know, right? It was so goofy. Like, the United States saying that it's pro-communism, and then Cuba and the Soviet Union banning it because they feel like it's anti-communism. They're just using that terminology as something to scare people into banning it. And it's just so curious that, like, these are brought up on, like, local municipalities, like I was saying. So whether it's like a public library or public school or whatever it is. But it's just curious that it's just like these are like normal people that are trying to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually kind of brings me up to the next topic that we have, is more specifically about challenges, because there has been a large increase in number of challenges over the last couple of years to where now there's even thousands in a year.
Mm-hmm. So how many of these book bans are being pushed by organized groups rather than individuals?
Yeah, I actually have the data pulled up here that it says 28% is brought up by library patrons, 24 of reported challenges were initiated by parents, 21 was organized by pressure groups, 13 by a board or administration, 3 by librarians or teachers, and then 2% by elected officials. So it's kind of all over the place. But back to what I was saying, a lot of these challenges don't actually become bannings, but we need to be probably more concerned with the increase of challenges, because that just shows that the transition that we're going through right now, and whether it is actually getting banned or not, it is getting removed from curriculums because it is controversial, and like public institutions tend to try to avoid controversial stuff like that.
Yeah, I feel like this is almost the equivalent of people beginning to do book burnings.
Totally, it's just kind of more and more hysteria around literature.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so sad because, I don't know, I kind of fear that it's possible that one of these court cases regarding the book bannings could possibly make it up to the Supreme Court or something. And if they deem that it isn't infringing on the First Amendment, more book bannings might go through. I feel like it's as applicable as ever to pay attention to this kind of stuff and, keep these books in circulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why everybody should be a part of their local elections, determining who is a part of their judicial branch and also who is on their school board nearby, because that is going to determine what their children are being taught.
Exactly, and I definitely think that that's like the strongest thing to take from this, is that, yeah, like your local courts do matter.
Mm-hmm.
Your local school board does matter. Like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a national ban for it to have implications on people's lives, right?
Yeah, and if the Supreme Court were to say that banning literature was totally legal and not against the First Amendment, then what's them to stop any piece of literature from getting banned? Stopping any ideas from getting passed along?
Regardless, I feel like 1984 is a must-read for all age groups, but it should firmly be a part of a high school curriculum, as there's just such important details.
Yeah, like standing up for what's right, whether or not your government says so or not.
It makes people learn from an early age that they can stand up for what they believe in,
even if it's against an impossible enemy. Yeah, so basically, vote in your local elections, and you should know that banning literature is always the step in the wrong direction. It's always going to undermine our ability to speak freely, and it can even affect the next generation or even earlier generations with how they can think critically.
I totally agree, and that I feel like that's such a major point of like why we want to make this channel, is because we want to be able to push people to think harder, like to make it more available to be able to look into books a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's such an important skill to be able to have, and it doesn't even have to be like fictional literature. For you to be able to do something like that. Like, it could be nonfiction, or it could be like even just an article, being able to decipher the true meaning of. But this is all we have for you guys today. If you were interested in where we got our information from, we got it from the American Librarian Association, and it's totally worth a look. I definitely recommend it. It's a very important thing that you should know.
And I think that's all we have for today. Bye.
See you.